Today, we will explore the Code of Hammurabi, world's first written law. Make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. Let's start with a brief overview before diving into the details. The ancient world was a place of chaos and brutality, where power was often decided by the sword. But one king, Hammurabi of Babylon, would change the course of history forever. In a world ruled by violence and inequality, Hammurabi set out to create something that would outlast his reign, something that would define justice for millennia to come, a set of written laws, carved into stone. At first glance, the Code of Hammurabi appears to be a strict, harsh set of rules. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, it proclaims. For centuries, this phrase has been seen as a symbol of brutal retribution. But is that the full story? What if these laws were not just about punishing the guilty but about establishing a system that would bring fairness and stability to a fractured world? As we peel back the layers of Hammurabi's code, we uncover shocking truths. The laws were not just about punishing crimes. They were a tool of control, a way for Hammurabi to solidify his reign and establish his divine right to rule. The code was as much about maintaining his power as it was about ensuring justice. And yet, despite its harshness, the code sought to protect the weak, the poor, and the vulnerable, a twist in a society where the strong often trampled the weak. But there's a darker twist still. The code's impact wasn't limited to Babylon. The laws, written in cuneiform on a towering stone stele, were designed to be publicly displayed, ensuring that no one could escape the king's gaze. But what if the code was never just about the people of Babylon? What if it was about sending a message to the entire ancient world, a warning to rulers everywhere about the power of written laws? Hammurabi's true genius lay not in the laws themselves but in how they shaped the world's perception of justice, turning the ruler from a mere monarch into a symbol of divine order. As Hammurabi's empire expanded, so did the influence of his laws. What started as a legal code for a single kingdom evolved into a blueprint for civilizations that would rise long after Babylon had crumbled. And in a twist that no one saw coming, it was the code's simplicity and its brutal fairness that would lay the groundwork for modern legal systems, and a concept of justice that endures to this day. But here's the real shocker. Was Hammurabi truly a man of justice, or was he just an ambitious ruler who used the code to cement his power, all while manipulating history to ensure his name would echo through the ages? The truth may lie somewhere in between, but one thing is certain: the Code of Hammurabi was not just a set of laws, it was a revolutionary act that would change the fate of the world forever. Let's discuss in detail. Topic 1: A kingdom built on blood. In the ancient, war-torn land of Mesopotamia, power is determined by the sword, and blood stains the earth in the pursuit of dominance. King Hammurabi, a ruler both feared and revered, ascends to the throne not by birthright alone, but through brutal conquests and the calculated extermination of rivals. His rise is swift, ruthless, and relentless. Every battle, every victory, is a testament to his unwavering will. His enemies fall before him, their cities razed, their families destroyed, as Hammurabi carves his name into the annals of history. But beneath the cold exterior of the conqueror lies a king haunted by something far deeper than ambition. Hammurabi's thirst for power is not driven solely by glory or wealth, it stems from a gnawing, almost primal fear. The fear of losing the very control he's fought so fiercely to claim. His empire, though vast, is fragile. A web of alliances built on loyalty, threats, and bloodshed. He understands better than anyone that to rule is not enough, he must secure his reign, and the mere strength of his armies won't be enough to keep his kingdom intact. In the dimly lit chambers of his palace, surrounded by advisors and generals, Hammurabi speaks of a dream that has taken root in his mind, a vision of lasting order, something that would transcend the temporary victories won on the battlefield. A code. A set of laws carved into stone, something that would bind his people together, give them structure, and ensure that his empire would endure long after his bloodline faded. It is in this idea of written law that Hammurabi sees the answer to his greatest fear, the fear of chaos, of rebellion, of the empire crumbling under the weight of its own unpredictability. But as the ink dries on the plans for his code, Hammurabi's fear only deepens. For even as he envisions the laws that will unite his people, he knows that his power cannot survive without it. The code will be both his legacy and his safeguard, a binding force that will tie his fate to the stone of Babylon. His enemies, his people, and even his own heart know this. The blood he has shed is not just for power, but to keep control, for in this brutal world, it's not enough to rule with strength, one must rule with fear, and more importantly, with the weight of written law. Topic 2: The birth of the code. In the heart of Babylon, under the shadow of towering ziggurats and the relentless gaze of Hammurabi, the kingdom's destiny is about to be sealed. After years of bloodshed and warfare, the king's vision of lasting order begins to take form in a way that will forever change his empire, and the world. The monumental task of creating a written code is not taken lightly. Hammurabi, in his regal chambers, surrounded by his most trusted scribes and advisors, dictates the laws that will govern every aspect of life. The laws are precise, detailed, and merciless in their simplicity. Engraved into a massive stone stele, they are meant to be displayed in the heart of the kingdom for all to see, where even the illiterate can understand the power that now binds them. To the untrained eye, the Code of Hammurabi is an unyielding set of rules designed to punish wrongdoers with brutal efficiency. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, it declares. Its harshness is undeniable, and the people quake in fear at the thought of its retribution. The common folk, already accustomed to living in fear, now have a constant reminder of the consequences of disobedience. The elite, too, are wary, knowing that they must tread carefully, for even the slightest transgression could result in a life-altering punishment. Yet, despite its severity, there is a twisted sense of order in it, and almost comfort in knowing that justice, however harsh, is now absolute. But as the laws are read aloud in the open square, celebrated and cursed in equal measure, a darker truth begins to emerge. Hammurabi's code was never just about justice, it was a weapon. A weapon designed not only to keep his kingdom in line but to consolidate his own power. Hidden within the code, between laws about theft, property, and family, are subtle clauses that ensure any threat to his reign is swiftly eliminated. Buried in the fine print, disguised under the guise of justice, are the seeds of Hammurabi's survival strategy. Laws that seem benign on the surface, laws that ensure protection of property, rights of women, and punishment for crimes, are, in truth, carefully crafted traps for anyone who dares oppose him. Those who challenge his rule, even in the slightest, will find themselves ensnared in a system that leaves no room for rebellion. Punishments are not just for criminals, they are for political enemies, traitors, and rivals. Anyone who stands in Hammurabi's way, whether through rebellion or ambition, will find their fate sealed by the very laws they once thought they could exploit. In this world of stone and fear, Hammurabi has not only forged a code of law, he has forged his own unbreakable grip on power. And as the people bow their heads in compliance, little do they know that the code that promises to protect them also holds the key to their king's iron-fisted rule. Topic 3: The Divine Right to Rule. The Code of Hammurabi is no longer just a set of laws, it has become a symbol of divine justice, an immutable truth that stands at the heart of the kingdom. The towering stele, etched with Hammurabi's decrees, rises above the city of Babylon, an imposing monument to both order and power. As the people gather before it, the words carved into stone echo with a sense of finality. Justice, once a nebulous concept, is now clear, concrete, and absolute. Hammurabi himself claims that these laws are not of his own making but have been handed down by the gods. He declares that he is merely the instrument of divine will, the chosen ruler placed on earth to bring order to chaos. The divine right to rule, he proclaims, is embedded within the code itself, a sacred covenant between the gods and his reign. For the people of Babylon, this is a powerful justification. They bend to the will of their king not only because they fear the punishment of the laws but because they believe Hammurabi's rule is sanctioned by the divine. In the temples of Babylon, priests sing praises to the gods who have supposedly entrusted Hammurabi with this great responsibility. The king is not just a ruler, he is the god's representative, a living embodiment of divine authority. His power is unquestionable, his reign eternal. The people accept this without question, their faith in both their king and the gods becoming one and the same. But as Hammurabi's power grows, so does the realization that the claim to divine authority may be nothing more than a carefully crafted political move. His enemies, both within Babylon and beyond, begin to whisper in the shadows. Could the gods have truly ordained Hammurabi to rule, or was it a clever manipulation of faith? Was the king truly chosen by divine forces, or was he simply using religion as a tool to manipulate the masses and solidify his control? Rival kings who once viewed Hammurabi as a mere regional ruler now watch with growing unease as he brandishes his godly claim to justify his every action. As his empire expands, Hammurabi's message is clear: defy me, and you defy the gods themselves. And yet, behind the throne, in the quiet chambers where Hammurabi and his advisors plot, a darker truth lurks. The divine right to rule is no longer just about the will of the gods, it's about the king's will. Hammurabi has turned religion into a weapon, using it to not only control his people but to dominate rival kingdoms, reminding them that defying him is akin to defying divine authority. The line between the divine and the human begins to blur, and in the process, Hammurabi's claim to godly power starts to feel less like a divine mandate and more like a brilliant political maneuver. One that no one dares question, for fear of invoking the wrath of the gods. Topic 4. The Hidden Agenda. As the Code of Hammurabi spreads across the empire, it is met with a mixture of awe and fear. The once fragmented and chaotic kingdom now begins to show signs of order. The people, from the lowest laborer to the wealthiest merchant, find themselves bound by a common set of laws, and they begin to believe in the promise of justice. Under Hammurabi's rule, the code appears to offer protection for all: slaves, women, the poor. All are given rights, or at least the semblance of protection under the law. The streets of Babylon are filled with whispers of Hammurabi's wisdom. His name is spoken with reverence, as a ruler who has lifted the kingdom from the brink of collapse and established a system that ensures fairness. The rich and powerful, though wary of the law's reach, find comfort in the order it creates, while the oppressed begin to see a flicker of hope. Even those who once lived in fear of being trampled by the elite now have recourse, a legal avenue to seek justice, however limited it may be. The code's promises, of justice for all, of protection for the vulnerable, become the cornerstone of Hammurabi's legacy. The streets hum with tales of his fairness, his generosity in offering the people a system that promises stability. For many, Hammurabi has become not just a king but a symbol of divine justice, a ruler who has finally done what no other could: bring peace to a fractured world. But as the laws take root and Babylon's power grows, a quiet whisper begins to spread in the shadows, a whisper of doubt. Beneath the surface of this so-called fairness, a darker truth begins to emerge. The justice Hammurabi claims to offer is not for the people's benefit. It is a carefully crafted illusion, one designed to tighten his grip on power. In secret, a few discerning voices begin to question the true purpose of the code. The protection promised to the weak and vulnerable may be nothing more than a facade, designed not to empower the powerless, but to ensure that those who might challenge Hammurabi's reign are kept in check. The laws, it turns out, have subtle but significant clauses that benefit the king, his loyal supporters, and the powerful elite. Any act of rebellion or defiance, no matter how small, is swiftly punished, while those loyal to the throne find themselves protected by the very same laws that are supposed to protect everyone. For the poor, the enslaved, and the powerless, the code's protections are a fragile shield, easily shattered by the weight of political machinations. As some begin to see through the veneer of justice, it becomes clear: the code was never truly about fairness, it was about control. A tool to pacify the people, to give them the illusion of justice while ensuring that any threat to Hammurabi's reign is swiftly crushed. The code, while appearing to provide justice, is actually a mechanism of oppression, designed to keep the masses compliant and the elite secure. As the truth spreads quietly through the empire, those who once saw Hammurabi as a just king now begin to wonder. Is he truly a ruler of justice, or merely a master manipulator who has used the very concept of justice to solidify his control? Topic 5. The People's Rebellion. As Hammurabi's grip on the kingdom tightens, the once vibrant and bustling streets of Babylon begin to hum with a different energy, one of unease and growing resentment. The laws, which were meant to bring justice and order, have instead sown the seeds of rebellion. The very system that Hammurabi believed would solidify his reign has begun to fracture, revealing the fault lines of his empire. People who once believed in the king's vision now feel suffocated by the weight of his laws, their daily lives controlled by the constant fear of breaking even the smallest rule. At first, the discontent is subtle: whispers in the dark corners of Babylon's taverns, quiet conversations among the slaves, murmurs in the marketplace. But soon, it grows into something more tangible. A group of rebels, once part of the elite, begins to organize. These men and women, who once thrived under Hammurabi's rule, have begun to see the truth behind the laws they once upheld. What they once believed was a path to peace and justice now reveals itself as a means of control, a tool for Hammurabi to keep his power absolute, to crush any form of dissent before it can rise. The rebels argue that the code is not a symbol of justice but a reflection of tyranny, a system designed to protect the powerful and subjugate the weak. They speak of the people, the poor, the slaves, and the women, all of whom are bound by Hammurabi's law but have no real recourse to challenge the unjust oppression they endure. The rebellion grows, fueled by anger and betrayal, as the rebels gain traction among those who feel oppressed by the king's iron fist. For the first time, there is a united voice, a collective cry for freedom and justice, one that calls for the destruction of the very laws that were meant to protect them. But within this rebellion lies a shocking twist, one that shakes the very foundations of Hammurabi's empire. Among the leaders of this uprising is a man who once stood at the king's side. A trusted advisor, a man who had helped craft the laws of the code, who believed in Hammurabi's vision of a just and unified kingdom. This advisor, once a loyal servant to the king, now stands against him. The man who had once helped shape the legal system that now binds the people is the one who sees it for what it truly is, a mechanism of tyranny. This advisor's disillusionment is deep. He was once a believer in the king's divine right to rule, a staunch supporter of Hammurabi's quest for justice. But over time, he has come to see the cracks in the system, the subtle manipulations in the law, the way Hammurabi has used his code to eliminate any threat to his power. The realization is a bitter one: the king is no just ruler. He is a tyrant, and the laws, once seen as a beacon of hope, are nothing more than chains that bind the people in submission. As the advisor steps forward to lead the rebellion, he carries the weight of his past actions. The very laws he helped create now stand as a symbol of everything he once fought for and now seeks to tear down. The people are caught in the crossfire of this dangerous political game, unsure of who to trust, unsure of where their loyalties should lie. The rebellion is no longer just a fight for freedom, it is a battle between two versions of justice, two visions for the future of the kingdom, and one man's tragic fall from grace. Topic 6: The Price of Power. As the pace of rebellion accelerates, the once unified Babylonian Empire under Hammurabi's iron-fisted rule begins to crumble. King Hammurabi's enemies close in from all sides. Internal discontent rises as his loyal allies begin to question their loyalty, while external forces, smelling blood, prepare to strike. The air grows heavy with tension, and the streets that were once filled with reverence and awe for Hammurabi now buzz with whispers of revolt. The people, who once saw the king as their divine protector, are now torn. Some still believe his laws will protect them, while others begin to doubt the very foundation of the empire. Hammurabi now stands at a crossroads. His empire, his vision, everything he has fought for is slipping through his fingers. The rebellion is not just a challenge to his authority, it is an existential threat to everything he has built. Surrounded by enemies, Hammurabi is forced to face the most difficult decision of his reign: strengthen his grip on power and crush all opposition, or risk losing everything he has meticulously constructed. In the silence of his chambers, Hammurabi reflects on the price of power. His laws, which were once intended to bring justice and order, have now become the foundation of a brutal tyranny. The system that was meant to protect the weak and establish justice has turned into a tool of oppression. The weight of the code presses down on him. It is no longer an instrument of justice, but a symbol of his need for control, his fear of losing everything. The more he tries to maintain the illusion of justice, the more he is consumed by the monstrous rule he once tried to prevent. As the rebellion grows bolder, Hammurabi makes a shocking decision. Amid the rising tension, he chooses not to maintain his control over the empire through firm rule, but through blood. In a brutal and unexpected move, Hammurabi uses the full force of his laws on his most trusted allies, the men and women who once helped him create the code, who once believed in his vision of justice. The time for mercy has ended. The rebellion has exposed the cracks in his empire, and Hammurabi decides that no sign of weakness can be tolerated, even if it means sentencing those closest to him to death. His most trusted advisors, who had once sworn loyalty to him, are dragged from their homes, their futures sealed by the very laws they helped create. In one night, their executions are carried out with brutal efficiency. The people, who once revered the king, now watch in terror. The ruler they once trusted is now a tyrant, a king willing to kill his own allies just to send a message. There is no room for opposition. No room for betrayal. In Hammurabi's empire, loyalty is the only valuable asset. The empire trembles as Hammurabi sends a chilling warning to all: oppose me, and you will meet the same fate. The code, which was once a symbol of justice, has now become the tool of a king driven by fear and a thirst for absolute control. Rebellion is no longer just a fight for freedom, it is a battle for survival, not only for the people, but for Hammurabi's very existence. Topic 7: A Kingdom Divided. Hammurabi, victorious in quelling the rebellion, stands alone at the pinnacle of power. The streets of Babylon are once again bustling with activity, and the empire, now firmly under his control, seems to flourish. His laws, the very foundation of his reign, have spread like wildfire throughout the land, creating a semblance of order, or so it appears. To the outside world, Hammurabi is the king who conquered chaos, the ruler who brought unity to a fractured kingdom. But beneath the surface, cracks begin to form. The very empire Hammurabi fought so fiercely to build is beginning to show signs of rot. The code, which was meant to unify the people, has instead created division. While some praise Hammurabi for bringing order, others live in constant fear of making the smallest misstep and falling victim to the harsh punishments of the law. Citizens are bound by the fear of breaking the code, not by a genuine belief in justice. The streets, once filled with optimism, now teem with whispers of discontent, as people wonder if their king's vision was ever about peace, or merely about control. Rival factions, both within the city and in the distant provinces, begin to plot in the shadows. Though Hammurabi has eliminated most of his political enemies, there are always those who seek to replace him, who wait for the right moment to challenge his reign. The kingdom, so strong in appearance, is now a powder keg, one spark away from igniting into a new round of bloodshed. But the most shocking betrayal comes not from a foreign enemy or a disillusioned general, it comes from within Hammurabi's own bloodline. His son, once the heir apparent and a trusted ally, begins to question the very foundation of his father's rule. In private chambers, far from the eyes of the court, the young prince speaks out against his father's regime. He believes that the code, which was supposed to bring peace, has instead stifled true freedom. What Hammurabi calls order, the prince calls oppression. To him, the laws are not tools of justice but shackles, used to control the people rather than liberate them. The prince's growing disillusionment is a slow burn, a quiet rebellion within the palace walls. Hammurabi, who once thought his son would carry on his vision, now faces the harsh reality that the very blood of his lineage has turned against him. The king, who spent so many years building a legacy of power, now finds his empire threatened by the one person who should have been his greatest ally. As the father and son stand on opposite sides of a bitter ideological divide, the kingdom is thrown into uncertainty. Hammurabi's iron grip on power is shaken for the first time, not by an external force, but by the flesh of his own flesh. The empire that once stood united under the banner of the code is now on the verge of collapse, not from outside forces, but from the very foundation upon which it was built. Tropic 8, The Shifting Sands. The once impenetrable empire of Babylon, which Hammurabi had painstakingly built, begins to show signs of decay. His enemies, who had long feared his power, now see an opening. The lands that surround Babylon, once hesitant to challenge the king, now recognize that his iron grip on the kingdom is weakening. Hammurabi's empire, once united under the firm hand of his laws, is ripe for exploitation. The external threats that once seemed distant now grow closer, their armies massing at Babylon's borders. The wars of conquest, which Hammurabi once used to expand his influence and solidify his power, now become a double-edged sword. The empire that thrived on military strength now faces increasing pressure from the very lands it once sought to dominate. Rivals, emboldened by the internal strife and growing dissent within Babylon, begin to strike, testing the limits of Hammurabi's rule. The very foundations of his power, his unyielding code, are starting to show cracks. The kingdom that once seemed untouchable is now vulnerable, and the shifting sands of fortune begin to erode Hammurabi's once sturdy empire. But the most devastating blow comes not from the might of Babylon's enemies, but from the very laws Hammurabi had relied on to maintain control. The code, once seen as an unbreakable symbol of justice, is now being turned against its creator. Hammurabi had long used the code to maintain a sense of order, to quash rebellion and to solidify his reign. But now, those very laws, once weapons of his rule, are being used by his enemies to unravel his power. The contradictions within the code, the very flaws that Hammurabi thought he had crafted to secure his reign, are now being exploited by those who seek to dethrone him. Rival kingdoms, understanding the code's limitations, use it as a tool against him. They exploit the legal gaps and inconsistencies Hammurabi had overlooked, using them to undermine his authority. Hammurabi's own laws, which were meant to unify and protect the empire, now serve to expose the weaknesses within his rule. What was once a symbol of divine justice becomes a trap, a tool that Hammurabi's enemies use to dismantle his kingdom piece by piece. The once unified empire, bound together by the strictures of the code, now fractures under the pressure of these external forces. Hammurabi, the king who believed he had crafted a perfect system, is forced to confront the brutal reality: the very laws that gave him power have now become his downfall. The empire is crumbling, not because of an external invasion, but because the foundation upon which it was built, the unbending code of Hammurabi, has become its greatest weakness. Tropic 9, The Fall of a King. As Hammurabi's reign draws to a close, the empire he fought so fiercely to build begins to crumble beneath the weight of its own contradictions. The once glorious Babylon, a kingdom forged through conquest and held together by the unyielding strength of the code, is now a fractured shell of its former self. The laws that were meant to ensure stability are now questioned by all, by the people, by his allies, and even by his own family. What was once a symbol of divine justice now seems like a tool of oppression, a bitter reminder of Hammurabi's insatiable need for control. The people of Babylon, who had once bowed in reverence to the code, now whisper in fear and disbelief. Was Hammurabi truly a man of justice, as he claimed, or was he simply a king who used the laws to secure his own power? The streets, once filled with admiration for the ruler, now echo with uncertainty. Those who believed in his vision begin to doubt the very foundation of his reign. The code, which was meant to unite and protect, has instead created division and fear. The empire that Hammurabi sought to preserve has been eroded by the very system he put in place. Even as the kingdom teeters on the brink of collapse, Hammurabi remains steadfast, clinging to the belief that his laws are his legacy. But the people no longer see a just ruler. They see a tyrant, a man whose ambition blinded him to the needs of the very people he swore to protect. The king who once wielded absolute power now stands alone, his empire unraveling, his vision shattered by the very laws that were meant to secure his reign. And then, in a shocking twist, comes the revelation that shakes the very core of Hammurabi's legacy. His death, once thought to be a natural end to a long and storied reign, is not the peaceful passing of a ruler who had achieved greatness. Hammurabi, the man who had crafted the code that bound his empire together, was betrayed by those closest to him. His death, it is revealed, was no accident. It was the result of a conspiracy orchestrated by the very people he had trusted most, those who had once believed in his vision. Among those involved in his betrayal is a trusted ally, a man who had once admired Hammurabi's leadership and vision. This ally, once one of the king's most loyal supporters, had grown disillusioned with the man he had once called a friend. The betrayal cuts deep, for this is not just an enemy's plot, it is the betrayal of a king's closest confidant, someone who had helped shape the very laws that now tear the kingdom apart. The trust that Hammurabi had placed in those around him was his greatest weakness, and it is this weakness that ultimately leads to his downfall. As Hammurabi dies, the Code of Hammurabi, which he had once believed would immortalize him, fails him in the end. The laws that were meant to protect him have become the very tools of his destruction. His legacy is left in tatters, the empire he built crumbling, his name tarnished by betrayal and the disillusionment of those who once followed him. The truth of Hammurabi's reign remains elusive. A man who may have once dreamed of justice but ultimately became a tyrant, betrayed not by external enemies but by the very people he trusted most. The fall of the king is complete, and with it, the fall of the code he so desperately sought to protect. Tropic 10, the legacy of the code. The dust of Babylon settles, and its once grand city, now a shadow of its former self, lies in ruins. Hammurabi's empire has crumbled, his reign extinguished by betrayal and disillusionment. But even in death, the legacy of his code endures. As the centuries pass, the laws etched in stone continue to resonate, not just as a relic of the past, but as a foundation upon which future legal systems are built. Across the ancient world, from distant empires to emerging civilizations, Hammurabi's code is revered, studied, and emulated. It becomes a symbol of both justice and tyranny, its influence extending far beyond the boundaries of Babylon. In the marketplaces and courtrooms of the future, Hammurabi's laws are invoked in debates about fairness and order. Scholars and rulers alike examine the code, questioning its harshness, its fairness, its implications for power. Some see it as a beacon of progress, a first step toward the rule of law, while others view it as a reminder of a despotic ruler who manipulated justice for his own gain. The world continues to grapple with the question, was Hammurabi a man of justice or a master of oppression? But as the camera pans over the ruins of Babylon, its crumbling walls and forgotten streets, the greatest twist of all is revealed. Hammurabi's true genius was not in the laws he wrote, nor in the empire he built, but in how he manipulated history itself. For though his empire has fallen, though the code has been questioned and his reign ultimately ended in betrayal, one thing remains undeniable: Hammurabi's name continues to echo through the ages. The empire may be gone, the kingdom reduced to dust, but Hammurabi's legacy is immortal. His genius was in crafting a narrative. One that ensured his name would be remembered, long after the stone monuments of his reign had crumbled. The laws, though controversial, served as a vehicle for his name to endure, to be passed down through generations, shaping the very fabric of legal systems that followed. In the end, it is not the empire he built or the laws he created that secures his legacy, but his ability to shape history, to control the narrative of his own reign. He ensured that his name would never fade, even as his empire did. The code, whether seen as a force for good or a tool of tyranny, became a permanent fixture in the chronicles of civilization, a constant reminder of a king who understood the true power of perception, the power of legacy. And so, as the ruins of Babylon stand silent, we realize the most profound truth of all: Hammurabi's victory wasn't in his empire's survival. It was in his ability to ensure that his name would live on, etched in the annals of history, for all eternity.